to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Although this is my story, it is kind of a story of Lebanon, really. So I was about 9 years old. Well, let's go back a little bit further. Both my parents are Lebanese. I was born in Kuwait because both of them worked in Kuwait.
What were the jobs?
My dad had a small construction company that built pipes for the running water and things like that. And my mom worked as a nurse's aide.
In Kuwait?
In Kuwait. And the Kuwait City Hospital, the only hospital at the time in Kuwait. We're going back to the early 60s now. And so I turned 5 and started school. Parents realized, hell, he's not learning anything. Because Kuwait was a pretty new country. They didn't have a lot of good schools and so on and so forth. So they shipped me back to Lebanon to live with my grandparents while I go to school. And I have an older brother that they had just done that to because he was in school in Lebanon.
How many siblings do you have?
Just one brother.
Just your older brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
So about 2 years went by like this, and then they moved back to Lebanon. So we kind of, at that point, I had a normal household. Even though my brother was too old to be in Hamana, my hometown, he was already in Beirut in school because he's 11 years older.
Oh, okay.
So he was already at pre-college, they call it there.
Yep.
Where so life was normal, for the first time because we lived in the same roof, whatever. My brother was there on the weekends, which he was never there in Kuwait when I was a kid.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, one day in school, I went to a Catholic school, but not all the kids are Catholic because it's commonplace in Lebanon for kids to send for parents to send their kids to Catholic school, even though they could be not Catholic. They don't have to take the religious class. And so, small town in the mountains, surrounded by other towns, and all of a sudden, we're at lunch, we're playing, and odd thing happened. The kids divided themselves into 2 groups. And I was on this side, just by coincidence, that's where I was standing. And they started throwing rocks at each other, the kids, in the playground. I was like, what the heck's going on? And then these kids are yelling at me here, that are standing here, telling me that I'm supposed to be over there. And I'm looking, and I have friends on both sides. Why am I supposed to be over there? So I just kind of crossed the line, went over there. I didn't throw any rocks or anything. And this was kind of an awakening for at the time, about 9 years old, that, hey, we're not all the same. And apparently it was, the country was divided. It was not just strictly on religious lines, but it was pretty much. So just to explain, you had Christians were over here, but you had a lot of Druze, spelled with a D, over here.
Druze.
Druze. It's a type of religion, and it's very common in Lebanon. It's only but there were some Christians here too because they had ideological, political similarities with what they did. So this was kids throwing rocks at each other. And then I remember the school changed after that. And we'd get in the morning and they'd line us up in straight lines and we'd pledge allegiance to the flag kind of thing. It was up to Lebanon, but national anthem and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started being aware that, hey, that people are carrying guns. There's my family members are carrying guns. They're going off to do stuff, and just the whole. You wake, think, wow, this is you listen, you hear things on the radio, you hear things on the news, but you're 9, you process, certain percentage of it. And then one day, my uncle went to Beirut to join a group of fighters that was defending a high point so that the city of Beirut, where the Christians live, doesn't get shelled. And my brother followed him late because he had left him behind. He didn't want him to go. And my uncle died on that day because of the fighting in a very famous place that there was a lot of fighting, the Holiday Inn, it's called, because it was a Holiday Inn hotel. And months later, maybe a little bit longer, the army fell Essentially, different groups of the army gave their guns to people that had affinity to, or the people would come in and take the guns. So basically, the might of the army became part of the civilians. Different factions were formed.
Oh, wow.
You had Sunni, Shiite, Christian, and each of those factors probably had two different factions. Druze as well. I mean, the whole country was in a civil war. The setup was due to the what brought this all about was the Palestinian issue. The Arab League had voted to arm the Palestinians in Lebanon to fight Israel. And the Palestinians basically were trying to take over Lebanon to use it as a base. And this kind of people took sides and all kinds of things. What the hell? Well,
and what year is this roughly?
So now we're talking 76.
76.
Yeah.
And you're 9 years old
I'm
at this
about
time.
to turn 10. Yeah, I'm 76.
Wow, that's exactly Lincoln's age right now. So
Yeah.
that's you, Lincoln. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So then one day, we're at home. There's definitely something going to happen. We're getting phone calls. We're hiding in my grandfather's house, and we get shelled at. They tell us to leave because they're coming, and so we get out of our house and we go to a neighbor's house, and we get hide in the basement. And it was a very traumatic night because there was explosions everywhere, and I didn't know what was happening, whatever. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Book Thief.
No.
There's a famous scene in that movie where the young girl is hiding from the bombing of Germany underground. And, imagine like if instead of this wood, it was rock, and you're in the basement, and when the bombs go off, little pieces of dust come out of the ground. You feel like you're going to get buried.
Oh, my goodness.
And they started, like, in the movie, they start singing, telling stories, something like that. But in my world, they started praying and telling, like, we're all Maronite Christians, so they were, and I fell asleep because I think the stress level was so high. That's one of my reactions. Is eventually I fell asleep.
Oh, wow.
We got up the next day, and we went up to our home, which was across the street, and it was blown up.
If you had stayed in your home, you'd be dead.
Yeah, they came and stole everything and blew it up. And,
were they after something in particular in your home, or your home just happened to get hit?
So because different like political family, our home was not the only one that was hit. It was whoever they suspected of, like they were fighters or they're politically involved or something like that. So my uncle he's the one that was killed in the war, and many of my family members, cousins, and so on. So just walk into your home and at 9 years old, and it was not like the way it was before. They fired some RPGs at the house too before they went in, so it had this like really nasty stench. Like that when you watch movies, you don't realize how smelly war is. But all that stuff,
I would not have thought that either.
All those rockets have different smells, and everything just burns and.
Is it like a gassy type smell, like burning gas, or is it almost more like a stench?
I would say like burning rubber or sulfur, like that.
Wow.
But could be very potent, like overwhelming, like you're going to choke sometimes. These were RPGs.
Interesting. That is not something that comes through in the movies,
I didn't see that, yeah. Even Private Ryan couldn't pull that off.
Yeah, exactly. Surprisingly. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there are certain smells that stick.
Yeah.
My dad died when I was about 10, and that smell of just him being in the casket and everything, just like it sticks, it's just like you don't forget that.
And images too stick, my mom was devastated because they had took in the life savings and furnished this house, built this house, whatever. But the image that stuck in my mind besides the physical destruction, but that kind of gets wiped away. Prior to this event, I had gone on a school trip to the beach in Beirut. And someone, I think my mom, got me a beach ball. And I thought it was great because, I was like one of the kids that didn't quite fit in. I was a little different. I joined the school late because I was in Kuwait. And so the beach ball made me really popular because everybody wanted to play with the beach ball.
Okay.
And walking into the kitchen, which was half demolished, seeing that beach ball imploded with rocks on top of it was like that symbol right there. Somehow the child in me at that point knew that my life had changed forever from that ball. And I don't know how a child would know that, but somehow it was just, I know a ball like that doesn't cost much money, so it couldn't have been that. So
it was a symbol of something greater. Wow.
So we had to go to Beirut after having some run-ins with the people that were in charge there, trying to kidnap people and things like that. Eventually, I was put in a car and sent to Beirut. My dad had already escaped. And
to Beirut?
To Beirut. Beirut at the time then was divided in half. The Green Line, famous Green Line. So you had one area was for the Christian side, one area for the other side. And the other side, was not. You can't say it was like Sunni or Shiite. It was basically the Palestinian and the other side. It was like the country was divided in half. So. We stayed there, tried to get a house, tried to find, whatever. Couldn't happen. Everybody in the mountains was being pushed to Beirut. It was just a mass exodus of people, blowing up homes or whatever, So through, a bunch of connections or different things, my dad managed to get a visa to United Arab Emirates, to Dubai. And this is in... So we had to go to a town called Zahli, stay in Zahli till we got to cross to Syria. We went to cross to Syria. They wouldn't let us cross because while we did have a visa at the airport waiting for us, we couldn't prove that at the border in Lebanon there's no email back then, and there's no mail service. We're in a war. But somehow they had to get proof that we weren't going to just go to Syria. And eventually that was lined up, and we went to Dubai. My dad started working all over again, starting from scratch. He started like a construction worker, and eventually opened up a company and started all over again. And I had the same experience that I had in Kuwait, where schools weren't that good. I couldn't go to the American schools or English-speaking schools at the time because I didn't know any English. So they sent me to Lebanon to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school.
Lebanon?
Back to Lebanon, but it was in a safe area of Lebanon where my aunt was a nun at a school that had boarding school as well.
Interesting. How many years after you left Lebanon to begin with?
Within a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because the schools just weren't good. So this school was a normal school, but it also had people that lived in the school, like a boarding school. The girls that boarded in the school were all girls. So I had to get some special strings, whatever, to be the first boy to go to this all-girl boarding school.
Oh, wow.
And first year actually was, I guess I was only 11 at the time. They let me just stay with the dormers with the girls, but the next year they moved me out to a separate. They felt I was getting too old.
Yeah.
For to be just there with the girls. So, but then they let more boys in. There were 2 more boys came in after that, or 1 more boy. My cousin, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so, but I made my mom promise that I wouldn't go to boarding school more than 2 years. I hated it.
Really?
I absolutely hated it. I hate that structure. I hate the rules. It was very impersonal. It was there was not a lot of getting out. It was terrible.
A very good education? Because I picture it to be, but maybe not.
Yeah. Generally it was, but for me it was a struggle because by then I had been through 3-4 different school systems
Right.
that taught 3-4 different methods.
Yeah.
So it was very confusing.
How was it being the only guy at an all-girl boarding school? Did you sort of enjoy that, or was it awful?
No, it was great. The only negative part about it was that I had parents and family. Many of them did not. Okay, that's why they were there.
Oh,
So every so often, my uncles would come up from Beirut, and or aunt would come up in Beirut, pick me up, and take me off for the weekend for a break. And I would show up on Sunday, late afternoon on Sunday. I'm upset because I have to go back to boarding school, but they're all sitting there polishing the banisters and cleaning the floors and whatever. And here I come.
Right.
So
you were out on town for the weekend, and they were working.
there was no winning, so a lot of them resented me for that.
Yeah, I bet.
But I could tell, I could definitely understand, how they felt, and to be honest with you, it was a miserable experience to come back, because I didn't like boarding school, and even leaving, I was like, this isn't forever. I'm gonna have to come back. But my mother stuck to her word, and 2 years was the limit.